Today we are going to be tier ranking all 42 episodes of The Chosen so far. That's 8 episodes for each of the 5 seasons, as well as the 2 Christmas specials that have come out so far. So let's get to it. Before we get started ranking the episodes themselves, I probably need to explain the categories I chose for this tier list, because in classic Bible nerd fashion, I couldn't just leave the categories as S, A, B, C, and D like you would normally see on a tier list, because to me that's a little bit too boring. Instead, to add some biblical flair, I decided to give these categories biblical titles going from the lowest ranking elevation to the highest ranking elevation, right? So we start at Gehenna, the Valley of Hinnom just outside of Jerusalem, then we go to the wilderness, then we go to Mount Carmel, then we go to Mount Sinai, and then we go lastly to Mount Zion, which are going to be my favorite episodes of The Chosen. And if you've studied geography, you might recognize that Mount Zion is technically at a lower ranking elevation than Mount Sinai, but I will point out that you never read anywhere in the Bible where somebody goes down to Jerusalem, right, where Mount Zion is. And that is because, from a biblical perspective, even though Jerusalem is not the biggest hill in the world, and even though it's not a huge mountain, it is the place where God dwells with man, right? And therefore, you can only go up to Mount Zion, and that is why I have that categorized as the top tier that we are going to be looking at today. And I also should clarify, before we get into the episodes, that I do not think that there is a single bad episode of The Chosen. There are certain episodes where I just don't like what they did in the episode, and therefore it kind of puts a negative taste in my mouth. But I think that all these episodes are really well made, well directed, well acted, all that stuff. And so just keep that in mind as we go through it. Even if an episode falls into the Gehenna category, even though that might have some negative connotations, I actually still think it's a really good episode. And so I just want to clarify that before we go into it. We are going to be going through all 40 episodes of the main show, as well as the 2 episodes that have been released as Christmas specials, and we're actually going to be starting off with a Christmas special because we are going in order of release. The very first episode that was ever released of The Chosen was released on December 1st, 2017, running 19 minutes long, and this is the description of the first episode, the Christmas special, The Shepherd. After struggling to bring a lamb acceptable for sacrifice to Bethlehem, a shepherd hears the angelic announcement and is witness to the birth of the Lamb of God. All right, so this is the episode that really kicked off the whole Chosen, and I'm tempted to put it really high because we wouldn't have the rest of the show if not for this episode. But at the same time, I do have to admit that I'm going to be ranking these not necessarily on the importance of the episode, but how much I am tempted to rewatch it, right? It's really going to be a very subjective tier ranking list, and that's why it's important to remember that my list is not the correct list, it's just my list, right? And so you can rank things differently, and that's totally fine. We can disagree in the comments. But I'm not going to be ranking these on how important the episode was. I'm just going to rank it on how much I like it, and I will say that even though I do like the episode, this is probably going to go into the wilderness category for me, mainly because I don't view myself really as going back to watch this one as much, just because of the budget restraints and because it's also just so short. And to me, the quality in this original episode is far inferior to anything that followed afterwards, right? Really, the show has just only increased in quality as time has passed, and so this one's just going to go into the wilderness. I don't really have anything against it, but to me, there's nothing within it that really, it is absolutely amazing. I think they handled things a lot better going forward as they figured out exactly what to do. All right, Season 1, Episode 1, I Have Called You By Name, 55 minutes long, first aired on April 18th, 2019. This is the description found on Amazon. 2 brothers struggle with their tax debts to Rome, while a woman in the red quarters wrestles with her demons. All right, this one. This is really the one that truly kicked off the show because it was the first episode that most people saw, right? Some people probably haven't even seen The Shepherd. But this one right here, I have a soft spot in my heart because this is obviously the first episode of the show that I saw all the way through. But I will have to say that this probably is still only going to go in Mount Carmel to me. Just because I have to leave room for some of the other episodes that are so much better, right? Really, I think that this episode gets really good at the very end whenever Jesus enters the scene and talks to Mary Magdalene. But other than that, you're really just being introduced to the various different characters. And again, I think that they do things a lot better in time to come. So, episode 2, Shabbat. Matthew validates Simon's claims with Praetor Quintus, Nicodemus investigates the miracle reported in the Red Quarter, and Mary receives surprise guest at her Shabbat dinner. 40 minutes long, originally aired on December 1st of 2019. Actually, sorry, April 18th, 2019. That was a typo on my little script there I got. Shabbat is also going to go on Mount Carmel, but it's actually going to go a little bit ahead of I Have Called You by Name. Which might sound surprising because I think a lot of people typically like the first episode more than the second episode, but as a Bible nerd who really loves looking into historical tidbits and stuff, I thought it was so cool that this whole episode was dedicated to just explaining the importance of the Sabbath to the Jewish people, right? I mean, here you are. I mean, to me, it makes sense whenever you're creating a show about Jesus and the disciples, it makes sense that you might devote an entire episode to just exploring who the characters are. That would be episode 1. But to me, it was actually a pretty bold take to make it like episode 2 is structured very similar to episode 1, where you really don't see Jesus until the very end. And to me, that was a very bold move to do 2 times in a row, right? It made sense for episode 1, but the fact that they were willing to do that for episode 2 again, just in order to emphasize the importance of Shabbat, I thought that was really good because it communicates that the main goal of the show is to explore the world of the chosen and explain what it was like to be a first century disciple of Jesus. I thought that was really cool. And so for that reason, it ranks a little bit above it, but it still does not work its way up into Mount Sinai territory. Episode 3, Jesus Loves the Little Children. Jesus befriends and teaches the group of children who discover his camp on the outskirts of Capernaum. This episode is remarkably short. It's only 33 minutes long, and it originally came out on April 18th of 2019. The first 4 episodes all came out at the same time. If you were around back then, you'll remember that. And I will say that this episode is going way up here on Mount Zion territory because to me, this is this to me is the essence of what the show exists to be. I love this episode. This is actually where I was introduced to the show. It is not the first episode that I watched all the way through. I obviously started with episode 1, but I remember that the first ad I ever saw for the show featured episode 3, right? I remember that I was driving home from work. I was on my phone. I probably should not have been on my phone while driving, but I was. Whoops. And I saw this ad and I clicked on the video and I was playing it and I was like, wow, this sounds really cool. And it was the scene that you see in the thumbnail there where Jesus talking with the kids. And I was like, this is an interesting take. And I wanted to watch the show. So I went and bought the first 4 episodes and I watched them with my family and I thought it was superb. Also, so in addition to this just being an amazing episode, it also ended up being the first ever, I guess, somewhat viral video I made because I re-edited this episode into a short horror movie trailer. And people had opinions on it. The Chosen actually shared it, and they seemed to like it. The creators of it did, but a lot of people had other opinions. But I thought it was really fun. And so I just absolutely love episode 3. To me, it is one of my favorite episodes of the show in its entirety, and it serves as a great introduction to Jesus, and it was a brilliant move to introduce us to Jesus by seeing how he interacts with kids. Brilliant idea. I absolutely love it. Season 1, Episode 4, The Rock on Which It Was Built. With his life and family under threat from Rome, Simon spends one last night fishing in a desperate attempt to square his debts. Andrew spots a familiar face waiting for them on the shores of Galilee. 49 minutes long, originally aired April 18th, 2019. This episode was the original somewhat season finale of the show. Whenever they first made the show, it was only 4 episodes long, and they were hoping it would go longer, but that was all they were funded for. And so this episode was a really good, strong episode. But I don't know where to put it. I think that there's a lot of other episodes that are far, far better. This one, tentatively, I'm going to put this in Mount Sinai, but it might end up getting moved down to Mount Carmel. Just because while it's really good, I think that the budget works against it a little bit to me. But it does have really good story arcs, and they really did a lot with Simon. Like, it really reminds you how much they did with Simon in those first, like, episodes 1, 2, and 4. Because you really feel his pain a lot by the time you get to episode 4 and he's crying out to God. And so they did that really, really well. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure my ranking of this one might move around. It's always hard for me because I really love season 1. And so I want to put all these really high up, but I know there's episodes to come that I'm going to want to rank higher. And so I'll just put it there for now and we will come back to it later. All right. Season 1, episode 5, The Wedding Gift. Nicodemus interrogates John the Baptizer while Jesus and his students make their way to a wedding celebration in Cana. When the wine runs low, Mary asks her son to intervene on behalf of the bridegroom's family. The episode was 55 minutes long, and it first came out on November 25th of 2019. So this is a really fun one to talk about just because I was watching the show by the time they were filming this, and I remember at this point I was already tracking the behind-the-scenes stuff. I actually probably followed the behind-the-scenes stuff more back then than I do nowadays. Nowadays, I don't really keep up with the behind-the-scenes things. But I remember I was so excited to see this, and I was like, ooh, they're doing the wedding. That's really exciting. And I really like this episode. I don't know if it goes on Mount Zion territory, but it definitely goes on Mount Sinai ahead of episode 4. This was there's a notable budget shift when you get to episode 5 where you're like, oh wow, like you can tell like it's getting better, and like the quality of the direction is even better, and the colors are richer. I remember I saw episode 5 and I absolutely loved it. And really, I think the back half of season 1 is really strong, right? I think probably season 1 is the most consistently strong season. But really the back half of it is where it really shines. And it starts with episode 5 with the calling of Thomas, the wedding, like all of that was absolutely brilliant. And I thought it was just fantastic from beginning to end. Season 1, episode 6, Indescribable Compassion. After witnessing the healing of a leper on the road to Capernaum, a woman forces her paralytic friend through the crowd to meet Jesus. 53 minutes long, originally came out November 25th, 2019. This episode right here is really good. It used to be one of my favorites. I don't find myself revisiting it as much, and I think that might actually be because they use clips of this so much in promotional material that I've kind of gotten a little bit tired of seeing some of it. But I think that this episode probably goes on Mount Sinai in between episodes 4 and 5. Because I really like it, but if I'm just wanting to rewatch an episode, like if I have downtime and I want to rewatch something, I'm going to rewatch episode 5 more than I'm going to rewatch episode 6. But there's a lot of really good stuff in this, right? Jesus heals the leper. Jesus heals the paralytic. They are making the return back from the wedding in Cana. There's some cool, like, just, what was I going to say? There's some cool, like, just character stuff that's done in this episode. So I really do like that. But I think I like episode 5 a little bit more. Episode 7, Invitations. Matthew struggles to reconcile the miracles he has witnessed with reality. Nicodemus meets Jesus by night. This episode was 38 minutes long, and it originally came out November 25th, 2019. And this episode is another Mount Zion episode, in my opinion. You'll notice that those are actually the shortest episodes, both of them, right? Episode 3 was only 33 minutes long, and episode 7 was only 38 minutes long. So these are definitely the shortest episodes, but they pack so much into those. Like, basically, it's like there's no breathing room because everything within these episodes is so good. But at the same time, they don't feel like overly fast-paced. I love this because episode 7 includes both the call of Nicodemus and the call of Matthew. And both of those scenes are done so well. They adapted John chapter 3 really well. And by the time you have Matthew being called, I mean, in scripture, like if you look at Matthew, Mark, and Luke dedicate 2 verses to Matthew's calling. Matthew only dedicates 1 verse to Matthew's calling, yet they did so much with the character of Matthew in the story that whenever he is called, you just feel so good about it, right? And so I thought that the way that they adapted the scripture to the screen was really well done. But I do have to rank it behind episode 3 because episode 3 is our introduction to Jesus. And just from a nostalgic perspective, I just love that episode so much. It's going to be hard to surpass that, though there might be some episodes that do surpass it. In the future, you'll just have to wait and see. All right, season 1, episode 8, the final episode, the season finale of season 1, I Am He. Jesus and his students complete their preparations and leave Capernaum for Samaria. Jesus meets with a suffering woman at Jacob's well and announces that he is the Messiah. This episode is the longest episode so far at 1 hour long, and it originally came out November 25th, 2019. And this episode, man, I hate to do this, but this episode is going to go on Mount Carmel, and it is going in between episodes 1 and 2. I think this episode's okay. Honestly, it might go lower than that. It might go lower than episode 1. I'm going to put it on this side of Mount Carmel because I like episode 8, but something about it it didn't feel like a season finale to me, right? To me, it almost like seems like episode 8 would have been a good opener to season 2. Not fully, but like the way it ends, I get that it was building up to Jesus proclaiming, I am he, to the woman at the well in Samaria, but something about it just didn't fit as naturally into like a season finale as some of the other season finales to come. And that's just because the creators of the show, they have like I mean, there's a restraint when you're telling a Jesus story, right? Because Jesus was a human being who lived a real life, and his life doesn't fit into nice, neat categories of season 1, season 2, season 3. And so it's hard to tell a story from that perspective. And so to me, I probably judge this episode harsher just because it doesn't feel like a season finale. Like, to me, I was like, like, episode 4 to me felt like a good season finale, right? Whenever Jesus calls Peter, like, that felt really like, oh yes, this felt like the end of a story arc. Whereas episode 8 was a great episode, but it didn't feel like the end of a story arc for the entire season. But we were introduced to the song Trouble at this point, which I thought was really cool. But I think that I just don't find myself going back to revisit this scene of this episode as much. Going into season 2 episode 1, Thunder. Tension builds among the disciples as they wrestle with the increasing fame of Jesus in Samaria. Jesus rebukes Big James and John for their prejudice and, after a near-violent encounter, gives them a new nickname. This is the longest episode so far, at 1 hour and 5 minutes long, and it originally came out on April 3rd of 2021. And this episode is going to go up at Mount Sinai probably between episodes 5 and 6. There are so many things in this episode that I love, and parts of it make me want to move it to Mount Zion, right? I love how it's bookended with the flash forward with the apostles, after the death of Big James, and then at the very end, you have John, like basically he's writing his gospel, and he's reflecting on his brother and their time with Jesus. That stuff is Mount Zion material. I thought it was awesome. The stuff in the middle, though, it does tend to drag just ever so slightly. And so, because I remember even watching that, I was so excited for season 2, episode 1. I remember getting my family together. We watched it together. I was so excited because I was like, whoa, a flash forward. This is really cool. And then in the middle of the episode, you really felt the length, right? This is an hour, 5 minutes long. And there were some scenes that I remember was like, okay, it dragged a little bit to where I still do really like this episode, but there's just so much going on that it just kind of like it bumps it down a little bit, but it's still Mount Sinai territory, right? Also, this episode serves as the introduction to the recurring theme of the apostles having no idea where Jesus is at any time whatsoever in the show. I don't know why they've chosen to do that constantly in the show, but this is where it really began, and for that reason I have to rank it lower, just because I cannot stand that trope. It really bothers me. I don't know why it bothers me so much, but I can't stand that the apostles never have any idea where Jesus is at. And so I got to rank that a little bit lower. In fact, because of that, I'm actually going to bump it down even lower between episode 6 and episode 4. All right, season 2, episode 2, I Saw You. A mysterious visitor seeks to meet Jesus, but the disciples are hesitant. Tension builds between Simon and Matthew. As the group heads to a new city, word arrives that Jesus' fame is growing. This episode is extremely rewatchable. And I love it. Like, I love, this is where we're introduced with Philip and Nathaniel. The interactions are great. It's a very, this is one of the episodes that you can just picture the whole thing in your mind whenever you think about it, just because it was such a very well-told story. And for that reason, I'm going to bump it up here, and I'm going to put it above season 2, episode 1, but behind season 1, episode 6. Because I really do enjoy this episode quite a bit. I don't know. Maybe it needs to be ranked higher. You know what? I'm gonna put it between season 1, episode 5 and 6. I think that's probably a good place for it. I really do like I See You. It's a really solid episode. It's adapting some of the most interesting verses in the opening chapter of the Gospel of John. And they just did a really good well of introducing you to these two characters and just helping them fit into the mold really well. I thought that was just really, 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 really well done. Season 2, episode 3, Matthew chapter 4, verse 24. A long, exhausting day turns into night as the disciples help Jesus deal with a large crowd hoping to be healed. Around the campfire over dinner, the group tries to get to know each other better, but tensions erupt. This episode is 37 minutes long, and it originally came out on April 12th, 2021. And yes, you heard that right. This episode came out on the same day as episode 2. I remember sitting there with my family. We were watching this, and they said, hey, we've got a plot twist. We're releasing a second episode tonight, and everybody went wild. Season 2 really was the premier time to be a Chosen fan, right? I know it's gotten more popular since then, but season 2 was at that really nice level where the show was popular, but it was still small enough to where everybody within the community knew each other. And I remember that's whenever I first started covering the show on YouTube, and it was just so cool. I got to know people, and we were just reaching out to one another, and we were all just so excited. It was awesome. And whenever you couple that excitement with the fact that this is genuinely one of the best episodes The Chosen's ever created, that obviously is going to place this in Mount Zion material. And yep, you got that right. This episode goes to my favorite spot so far. I love season 2, episode 3. First off, from a technological perspective, this is a masterpiece, right? This episode opens up with that really long one shot where it just like tracks everybody and you just see what they're up to. And then it culminates in that fiery exchange, literally fiery exchange around the campfire between Peter and Matthew and James and John. And then Jesus comes in all disheveled and then Mother Mary goes and tends to him. This episode is firing on all cylinders and it's just really, really, really well done. And it also follows with the trend of the shorter episodes of the show being amongst my favorite. And I don't think that's like that's not because I don't like longer material. I love long material, but to me it needs to merit that. Whereas I think the shorter episodes of the show, it's like you can tell that the showrunners and the creators, they knew exactly what they wanted to say. They knew how they wanted to say it. They got it filmed. They got it edited together. And it's just one really good, solid episode, right? And so I think you see that in all of these, which I just think is really cool. The only bad thing that this episode has against it is the fact that its title is so strange. Matthew chapter 4, verse 24. Basically, if you flip to Matthew 4:24, you will see that it says that he traveled in that region, he performed miracles, and I guess that's what they were referring to. But this is going to highlight a trend that I do see in the show, and to me, it bothers me. Their episode titles are weird. Like, some of the episode titles are really good, to where you read that episode title and you're like, yes, I know exactly what episode that's referring to. And then some of the episode titles are like so random, right? Like I don't know. I could think of just so many other names that like you could have probably named this episode to where you're like, oh, I know exactly what that is. Whereas like you have to like go look up Matthew 4:24 and be like, oh, okay, I think I know what episode that is. There's going to be a lot of episodes like that in the show where it's just like the title is just strange to me, whereas I think that if you're creating a TV show, you should probably try to name the episode like something where like when the audience hears it, they're like, oh yes, I know what episode you're talking about. Some episodes are like that, some episodes not so much. But this episode, genuinely one of my favorite episodes of the show. I just think it's really, really, really well done. And this is where you get to see, like, it's very character centric. And I think that's really good because it helps you see how much we have come to know and love the characters. Season 2, episode 4, The Perfect Opportunity. As Jesus and the disciples head to Jerusalem to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles, a new enemy follows them, while a familiar enemy awaits. Ooh, all right. So this is where we really get to be introduced to Atticus, right? This is where we get to see Simon the Zealot. Yeah, that's some fun stuff there. I don't know where to rank this episode, though. I like it. I don't think it's Mount Sinai material because, again, to me, it does drag just a little bit. Did I say how long it was? It's 59 minutes long, so it's a longer episode. And it originally aired May 10th, 2021. Oh, no, sorry. Oh, no, yeah, sorry, yeah. May 10th, 2021, 59 minutes long. The Perfect Opportunity. I don't know what to rank this. I think it's going to go on Mount Carmel. And I think it's going to go above, like it's going to be at the top of the Mount Carmel list because I do like this episode a lot. I think I'm going to rewatch it more than I rewatch like season 1, episode 1, season 1, episode 2. But there are some things like, I know the end of this episode to me, people loved it. I found it really dramatic whenever Jesus like, sometimes you got to stir up the water and then like he like starts walking off and then it's like, like this to me is the birth of like the, they really embrace like the troublemaker Jesus, which to be fair, Jesus is a troublemaker in the Gospels, but to me it's like it felt more like rebel without a cause, like Jesus like just like being like, oh yeah, like I don't know, like there's sometimes in the show where the way that Jesus acts, like it's just so dramatic to me, like it kind of takes me out of it to where yes, I get it's a show, I get it's supposed to be dramatic, but there's certain things to where I'm like, okay, it just feels kind of goofy to me when I'm watching it, but the rest of the episode I did really like. I don't know. You know what? I'm going to move this down between season 1, episodes 1 and 2, because I think I do like Shabbat a little bit more because of what it did. But I don't know. That's a hard one for me because I do like this episode. I just don't think I'm going to, I don't know. All right, we'll just move on. We'll just move on. And if I change it later, we'll change it. Season 2, Episode 5, Spirit. After stirring the water, Jesus is now pursued by Simon the Zealot, Atticus, and Shmuel. John the Baptizer visits the group and tells Jesus his dangerous mission. Meanwhile, back at the camp, Mary Magdalene is devastated by an encounter with a mysterious and dangerous stranger. This episode was 48 minutes long and originally came out on May 22nd, 2021. That was another thing about season 2. You never knew when the episodes were going to come out. They would basically, like, as soon as they finished editing the episode, they were like, hey, we're releasing it tomorrow. And you're like, oh, that's really exciting. And so, like, there were 2 weeks in between these episodes, or not even a full 2 weeks. It was like 12 days. To me, that's just like really cool. Like, they were released very sporadically. It kept you on the edge of your seat, and it was actually really exciting. This episode, this is going to go in Mount Carmel, and this is going to go at the top of it, because I really like this episode. Honestly, the thing that makes this episode to me is the interaction between Jesus and John the Baptist. I love that whole interaction. I thought it was really great. John the Baptist is one of my favorite characters in Scripture, so I love to see the interaction there. And this is another one of the places where this is probably where you got to see controversy being stirred up by The Chosen for the first time, because at the end of this episode is whenever Jesus is rehearsing his sermon, and people lost it. People were freaking out. They're like, Jesus would never need to rehearse a sermon. Why would you put that in there? This is blasphemous. And I, of course, I went and made a video, and I was like, hey, well, there's no reason Jesus wouldn't necessarily need to have to do that. And if you've got an issue with that, you probably need to look at your own theology, because there's nothing in this that is outright heretical. And so there was a lot of hubbub and talk about this episode. And to me, it highlights why the show is so good. I love that they give us the opportunity to explore things like that, right? To me, that is when the show is at its best, whenever it challenges your normal perceptions of Jesus, and it forces you to reconsider, oh, why do I view things this way? Is it because of traditions that I have adopted about Jesus, or are my convictions actually coming from Scripture, right? And to me, that is really the main purpose of the show, is that it challenges you to re-examine your understanding of Scripture so that you can dive into it and better understand it and the world around it. And so to me, this episode does a really good job at that. And I just really like the episodes where they challenge you. Because there's even been times with me where I'm like, oh, I've never considered that. I want to go look into that and figure out why I've never considered that. And to me, I just think that's where the show is at its best. And so I really do like that episode. But there's other stuff in the episode that to me, I think drags it down. That's why it's not Mount Sinai material. But it definitely does earn its spot right here at the top of Mount Carmel. All right, Season 2, Episode 6, back half of Season 2, Unlawful. Matthew and Simon try to get along as they search for Mary in dark places. The group fears for Mary as they struggle with the lack of food and bad news about John the Baptist. Meanwhile, Jesus continues to upset Pharisees across multiple regions. This episode was 45 minutes long, and it came out on June 22nd, 2021, 1 month after Episode 5. Again, the release was very sporadic in all this. In this episode, I don't know how to feel about this one. I like a lot of it. I really like the interactions between Simon and Matthew. I really did not care for the plot about Mary Magdalene. And I don't have an issue with the idea. Like, I know that the whole thing they were trying to explore was that, people struggle with sin and that, you might have relapses and stuff like that. I thought that was great. But I remember as I was watching it, I was like, this is going to be a 7-season show about Jesus. And we were spending so much time on plot points that really didn't feel super necessary. I feel like this episode was more preaching at me than like just telling a good story. Because to me, like as I was watching the episode, I was like, oh, I get exactly what they're trying to convey. I know the message they're conveying to the audience. But to me, I think the show is at its best whenever it's just telling a compelling story. And I think that they can do that while mainly adapting stuff that you see in Scripture. And I think that's where you see a lot of the stuff at its best, right? Even though you'll notice that a lot of my favorite episodes have been ones that are entirely fictional, but they contribute better to your understanding of the characters that we do encounter in Scripture, right? And so to me, Episode 6 here, honestly, I hate to say this because there's a lot I love in it, right? I love the interaction between Simon and Matthew. I love that stuff. But to me, this is actually going to go into the wilderness. It's going to go above the shepherd, but it goes into the wilderness nonetheless, just because this was one of the first episodes where I was like, yeah, it just felt like, I don't know, this is an issue that I have with a lot of like Christian entertainment, is that sometimes it favors like the message over the story itself. And this is the first time where I felt that in the show, where it was like, what, like, it felt like the whole reason why Mary went through this was because they wanted to communicate to the audience, hey, it's okay, Christians struggle, which I think is a great message, right? Yes, we need to hear that, but to me, it didn't feel like it served the story itself that well. It seemed like it was more of a distraction from the actual story of The Chosen, right? Like all the momentum about the Jesus movement and stuff like that really kind of came to a halt, so we could just focus on this. Even though there was the character development between Matthew and Simon, which I thought was really good, right? Like that part is the one place where it's like, okay, yeah, you do see some extra development there. But the rest of it to me kind of, I don't know, like it felt a little bit flat to me. And I can already see people going in the comments and saying, oh, no, all these other things developed as well. Yes, I agree that in this episode, plot did develop and it did contribute to the overall arc of the show. But something about it, just the episode itself just kind of, it held me back a little bit. And so I can't put it higher. Who knows? Over time, my opinion might change. Season 2, Episode 7, Reckoning. After learning of Jesus' whereabouts, Quintus sends Gaius to arrest him. The disciples lose control as they argue about how to respond. While seeking information about where Jesus has been taken, Andrew and Philip encounter old friends. Oh, man. This episode also, I don't know, it just felt like a strange episode, because I realized that they were trying to highlight the tension between Jesus and the Romans and stuff like that, but it didn't really seem to go anywhere to me. It seemed like, again, it was more just to be like, hey, look, Andrew's suffering from anxiety. It's okay to suffer from anxiety. Like, I don't know. Like, it just... I remember I liked the opening scene, because I'm pretty sure the opening scene of this episode, it's been a while since I've watched it, but I'm pretty sure that's like the scene with like Peter, Andrew, James, and John just like casting stones in the water. I thought that was great. I don't know. Like, something about that just felt very human and real. Whereas a lot of the other developments in the show, it just felt kind of contrived a little bit. I still like the episode, right? I feel like I'm coming out too harsh against these. The only reason I'm doing this ranking, by the way, is because I love The Chosen and I like all the episodes. Like I said, there's no bad episodes of the show. I'm just trying to figure out why, like, I'm just kind of going off my gut feeling, and this episode just doesn't rank very high for me. I think it's going to go, it's going to go below Season 2, Episode 6, but above The Shepherd. I feel bad for The Shepherd now, because it keeps getting bumped further and further back. But really, the main thing for The Shepherd is that it just, the budget was just low, and it's so divorced from the rest of the show, right? Like it's a really good episode, but it doesn't feel like it feels like a short film for a church, right? And so that's why it's so low. But, I don't know. I feel bad because I really like these episodes, but I don't know. Maybe later on they'll move around. We'll see. Let's move on. Season 2, Episode 8, Beyond Mountains. While Jesus and Matthew prepare the content of the big sermon, the disciples spread the word while fighting amongst themselves. A high-ranking Sanhedrin member is shocked by Shmuel's reports on Jesus. Thousands arrive for the sermon, including familiar faces. All right, so this is where we're introduced to Shammai. This is where they're getting ready for the Sermon on the Mount. This is where we get that amazing Beatitude scene. Man. See, I've got to leave those upper spots for, like, the best episodes. I don't know. I think this one belongs, going off my gut feeling, I think this one goes, it goes to Mount Sinai for sure. It goes above Episode 1, just because the Beatitude scene in general is really good. I think that's a good place for it. I think that's probably a good spot for it, because I really like the Beatitude scene, but there's other stuff in it that also like just drags a little bit for me. We are introduced to Judas in this episode, which is really cool. 57 minutes long, July 10th, 2021. Oh, I forgot to mention that the episode 7 came out on June 29th, 2021. I don't think I mentioned that. It's 44 minutes long. Main reason I want to highlight that is because that was the day before my birthday. My birthday is June 30th, so that was kind of cool. But yeah, episode 8, I think it goes on Mount Sinai between episode 6 from season 1 and above season 2, episode 1. Season 2, episode 1, again, the beginning and ending of it, I loved. And I really like how they adapted the Sons of Thunder thing, but to me, it still just ranks low because the stuff in the middle really just, like, dragged. And I remember, like, I had, like, told my family, I was like, hey, this show's really great. We should sit down and watch it. And I remember, like, we were watching that episode, and, like, they were kind of starting to get a little bit bored, and I was like, oh. And maybe it would be different if they'd watched season 1, but, yeah. Yeah, I think that's good. All right. So now we go to season 0, episode 2, aka The Messengers, the second Christmas special of the show. And this is the description that we have. Experience the first Christmas through the eyes of Mary and Joseph. Follow the young couple as they take the long road to Bethlehem and prepare for Jesus' birth. This episode was 39 minutes long, and it came out on December 1st, 2021 in theaters. Where do I put The Messengers on here? So this is where we're introduced to Lazarus, right? Because there's the flash forwards with Mary Magdalene and Mother Mary. This is really good. This is definitely above the original Shepherd, like the original Christmas special. But where does it go in the grand scheme of things? I really do like this episode quite a bit. I don't want to put everything in Mount Sinai, but I think it belongs. I think it belongs in Mount Sinai. I think it's gonna go right between season 2, episode 1, and season 2, episode 8. I think that will be where those go. Cool. I don't really have anything else to say beyond that. All right, and now we jump to season 3. Season 3, episode 1, Homecoming. Jesus delivers the most life-altering sermon in history. The result? More followers, more enemies, and disciples ready to follow Jesus anywhere. This episode was 1 hour and 1 minute long, and it came out on December 10th, 2022. Okay, so this is the Sermon on the Mount episode, right? Season 2 ended with this big cliffhanger where Jesus steps out on the platform, and then season 3 opens up. And I remember I went to the premiere for this, right, where they showed episodes 1 and 2 together at the premiere in Atlanta, Georgia, which was a really cool experience, but I remember liking episode 1 less than I liked episode 2. The Sermon on the Mount part was really good, but then after that, it kind of dragged a little bit as you're just like I remember, like, season 3, episode 1 feels like 2 episodes split, kind of combined together. The first half of the episode is like, ooh, Sermon on the Mount and the aftermath. And then it cuts to, like, other stuff. And to me, they would have almost been better as, like, 2 separate episodes. I know that would have messed things up because they're all 8-episode seasons. But to me, they felt like very different episodes. Other than the fact that they were bookended by the fact that, you know, like, I think that basically the season opened up with, like, Matthew and his father, like, having, like, this break off with one another, and then it ended with them reconciling. So that was really cool. But the episode itself is just structure-wise just kind of strange. This episode is going to go... It's going to go at the top of the wilderness. Oh, no. It's above season 1, episode 8. Yeah, it's going to go right there. It's going to go on Mount Carmel, above that. You know what? I hate to do this. I'm bumping down the season finale of season 1 to wilderness. Not because it's bad, but just because I think I'm going to need more space in Mount Carmel. And so I'm just going to kind of take that as it is. Maybe it'll be moved back up later, depending on how much space I have once we get closer to the end. Anyways, season 3, episode 2, 2 by 2. Jesus is a problem for the Romans as he officially sends the 12 apostles on an exciting but dangerous mission, causing little James to ask why he hasn't been healed. This is, I think, the longest episode of the show so far, at 1 hour and 10 minutes long, coming out December 17th of 2022. Again, I saw this episode at the premiere, and I thought it was fantastic, right? I thought it was really cool. This is where you have Jesus sitting the apostles down, and he's like, hey guys, I'm going to send you all out 2 by 2. And they have this amazing discussion. First off, he appoints them as his apostles. That was really cool. And they just have this amazing conversation about exactly what he expects them to do, culminating this amazing conversation between him and little James, where little James says, why haven't you healed me? And I remember, again, this was super controversial. But to me, I thought it was a really good conversation to have, right? I think, first off, I agree that what they depicted in the show with this conversation between little James and Jesus, I think it's 100% plausible that conversations like this could happen. But even hypothetically, if The Chosen was wrong, I think it's important that shows like this challenge us to ask questions like that. And I thought that was really good, and it actually contributed to the overall story because it helps us understand Jesus better. That was really good. So this episode is going to go, I think it goes at the top of Mount Carmel, right? Despite all I said about it, I still don't think it's Mount Sinai territory, because really these episodes right here are all really, really good episodes. But I did really like this, and that scene at the very end was just a nice ending to it. And I thought it was really, really well done. All right, season 3, episode 3, Physician, Heal Yourself. Jesus returns to his childhood home for the Jewish New Year celebration. His childhood friends and a family are buzzing with what they've heard until he tells them the truth of who he is. This episode is 54 minutes long. It first came out December 24th, 2022. That is Christmas Eve. And this episode is going into Mount Zion territory. It is going between season 1, episode 3 and season 1, episode 7. I love this episode, right? This is the big I am the law of Moses episode. And people went crazy over it, right? They were like, whoa. Is this quoting the Book of Mormon? What's going on here? And no, it's not quoting the Book of Mormon, but it's a really good episode. It's this episode, like, yes, it was controversial. Like, honestly, this episode was probably the most controversial since season 2, episode 5, right? Season 2, episode 5, that's where Jesus was practicing the sermon. This episode was super controversial, even more than the one that preceded it, where little James and Jesus had that conversation. And it really came down to the whole thing. Like, this is where people were like, wait a second, The Chosen is partnered with Angel Studios, and Angel Studios is funded by Mormons, and Dallas Jenkins is friends with Mormons, and therefore Dallas Jenkins is secretly a Mormon, and that's not what's going on, right? It's just not. But and I remember just being so annoyed by that, because I was like, guys, like, just pay attention to the episode, right? Like, figure out what is going on here, and it's a really good episode. You'll notice that my favorite episodes so far have all been the third episode of each season, and that is because for the first 3 seasons, Dallas Jenkins was solely responsible for writing those episodes, and I think I just really like how Dallas Jenkins writes. I think his stories are really good, and because each of these 3 episodes are different, right? They're kind of like a little break in the story where they allow things to breathe a little bit, right? Season 2, that's where, Jesus is off ministering and you get to meet the apostles for the first time, right? Like, they're all just talking to each other. You get to learn their backstories, and you get to see that interaction between Matthew and Peter where you're just like, oh, wow, there's a lot of hatred here, right? Season 1, episode 3, this is your first introduction to Jesus, right? He's with these kids that you've never seen before. You're not going to see that much afterwards, but you're getting to see who he is, right? And then season 3, episode 3, you're seeing Jesus back at his hometown. How do people view Jesus if they haven't been along with him for this whole journey that we've been along with him, right? And so to me, these, like, the third episode of these first 3 seasons explored some really interesting things, and so I really like them, and I think that Dallas just did a really good job of them. But yeah, the whole episode was great. Jesus being back in Nazareth for Yom Kippur, the whole celebration, everything that was going on, ultimately culminating in him being in the synagogue at Nazareth and having this whole, like, just shouting match with the rabbi there, and then ultimately being taken out to the hill, and they're going to throw him down. And then even the way they depicted that, right? Like, people always question, how did Jesus escape? And in the show, the answer is simple. He just spoke with authority, and they backed off. I was like, that was great. I've never depicted it that way. I'd always depicted it as, like, some, like, miraculous thing where, like, everybody, like, froze in place, because I think that's how it'd been preached to me, and I never questioned it. But the way they depicted it in the show, again, it challenged me, and I like stuff that can challenge me, right? And so to me, great episode of the show, easily a Mount Zion episode. Season 3, episode 4, Clean Part 1. 2 by 2, the disciples carry out Jesus' mission to heal, cast out demons, and preach his words, but upon returning, they struggle with understanding what happened. This episode was 59 minutes long. It first came out on December 31st, 2022, 1 week after the previous episode, which means this came out on New Year's Eve. And I'm going to be honest with you, I think that the back half of season 3 is probably one of the weakest portions of the show. And I don't know if that's controversial or not. I really don't keep up with how people view each of the seasons collectively. But these and we're not even in the back half yet. This is episode 4. But to me, these are probably some of the weaker episodes of the show in general. I thought it's a good episode, but to me, I think it's just like nobody has any idea what's going on. Jesus, throughout these episodes, this is where you really get to see the apostles. They have no idea what they're doing, which is something that we do kind of see in scripture, but they, like, hyper emphasize it to the point where it's like, in these episodes, it's hard to figure out, how do Jesus and the apostles, like, have a special relationship? Because it seems like the crowds know where Jesus is before the apostles ever do, and you really see that being emphasized throughout this. That being said, you do see some cool stuff in this episode, right? This is where Jesus, we're introduced to Veronica, the woman with the flow of blood and stuff like that, and we're introduced to Jairus and all that stuff. Actually, Jairus might have been introduced prior to this, I don't recall. But this is where, like, his story is really coming to the forefront. And so there's good stuff in here, but I think that it's going to go pretty low. It's actually going to go below the shepherd, right? It's not Gehenna territory, right? We haven't gotten there yet, but it is one of the lower ones to me. All right, season 3, episode 5, Clean Part 2. As tensions amount at home, Simon and Gaius work together to fix the water problem in Capernaum. Meanwhile, Jairus and Veronica are desperate to find Jesus as the only hope for their crises. So this episode, it kind of falls in the same category. It's going to be wilderness for sure. This is where we actually get to see, we get to see both the conclusion of Veronica's story and Jairus' story. That's really cool. But there's other stuff in the episode that just, like, kind of, it doesn't make me want to go rewatch it a whole lot, right? I still think it's a really good episode, but it's probably gonna go between season 2, episode, 6, and season 1, episode 8. It's wilderness territory, but it's higher up there. And again, remember, even the wilderness episodes are great episodes. They're just not ones I want to rewatch as much. And I like this episode, but I just don't see myself going back to it a whole lot. There's not many times where I'm like, you know what, I just really want to rewatch this episode in particular. I like the end of it, right? The end of it is where, like, you know, they all go down to the, like, I guess it's the Sea of Galilee, and they're just, like, kind of goofing off, and, like, they're, like, playing chicken in the water and stuff, and then Eden's standing there crying. That was a really solid ending to the episode. But the stuff in between was like, it was good, right? And there was even, like, the part where, like, whenever when Veronica reaches out and touches his tassels, like, the little camera trick they did there, where it's like he, like, freaks out, like that was really cool, like, cinematography, like, wise, really well done. But I just don't see myself going back to this episode as much. All right, season 3, episode 6, Intensity, Intent City. This is one of those episode titles where I'm like, okay. It's like, you can tell they thought they were doing something there. Okay, Andrew and Philip discover their previous mission resulted in devastation that will require a return. Simon Z is finally forced to confront his past. This is, I think, the longest episode of the show so far. 1 hour and 12 minutes long. Only like shortly followed by episode 2. And it came out on January 14th of 2023. I'm going to be honest with you. This episode is going to go really low because I don't really remember that much about it. Like, I remember this is where, gosh, I genuinely don't remember. Like, I remember Jesus healed people. I remember Simon Z being confronted. But I don't remember what else happened really in this episode, like off the top of my head. And to me, that in and of itself makes it rank the lowest because it is the longest episode of the show so far, but I don't recall what exactly happened. I think that maybe this is where, Andrew and Philip, like, I think Lysander came and, like, warned them, like, hey guys, there's some issues over here. So Andrew and Philip went off the Decapolis to, like, talk about it. But I genuinely could not tell you what else happened. I think that maybe, Simon and Eden maybe had a discussion about the miscarriage stuff. Maybe this is where it's revealed. I don't remember. I genuinely could not tell you what happened in this episode. And for that reason alone, it goes the wilderness period because it's the longest episode, yet it's the least memorable, which to me is not necessarily a good sign because it probably tells me that there's a lot of stuff going on here that probably did not have to happen. And it just kind of dragged. I don't know. So anyways, season 3, episode 7, Ears to Hear. Andrew and Philip return from their trip with desperate news. They need Jesus' help to solve a huge crisis in the Decapolis. Jesus leads them on a trip to the dangerous region. This is 1 hour and 5 minutes long. February 4th, 2023 is when it first came out. This episode, again, these episodes in general, they just don't rank very high for me. Because to me, something about the back half of season 3, it just dragged a little bit to where it was like, okay, like it felt like we were just moving from one thing to a next. And I think this is also where, like, we were introduced to, like, Zebedee's, like, olive oil business and stuff, and to me it just seemed very random. I don't remember if that was going on yet or not. I honestly, a lot of season 3 kind of just, like, blends together for me because I just it did, like, the episodes didn't feel as unique, right? Does that make sense? Right? Like, we're season 1, episode 1, like, I mean, the episodes of season 1, every single one of them, I can remember exactly, like, if you tell me a scene, I could be like, I remember what episode in season 1, right? If you were to tell me the same thing for season 2, I could tell you that as well. Season 3, though, is where that really starts to fall apart, to where, again, this is hard to do because you're telling the story about Jesus, and his story doesn't fit into nice and neat seasons and episodes. But I think for those, like, the early seasons of the show, you could tell that the creators had, like, a clear voice and, like, oh, this is what we want to do in each of these individual episodes. And I think season 3, and this is going to continue on to seasons 4 and 5 as well, you see that there is a difficulty because they realize, oh, we have to eventually get to this part in the story, and therefore they're having to speed things up, and there's certain stories they want to tell, but they're trying to blend that with, like, oh, we need to get to X, Y, and Z, right? And so to me, the episodes themselves, they don't stand as uniquely on their own, and therefore, it's not that the episodes themselves are bad, they just don't stand as well on their own. It's almost like the whole season feels like an 8-hour-long movie, rather than 8 1-hour-long episodes. Does that make sense? And so that's the reason I'm just trying to explain why these are ranking so low. It's not that these are bad. They're just not as memorable to me to where it's like, okay, yeah, I remember, like, something, I think that happens in this episode, but I'm not totally sure. And again, the episodes, like, the titles themselves don't really tell us that much, right? Like, it'd be one thing I was like, oh yeah, I remember exactly what that is. I don't know. I know that this episode ends with Peter and John like making their way to the Decapolis, and then like, Peter and John have that conversation about Eden, and then like they end up turning and they like run off to like see Jesus and stuff like that. And so I remember roughly what happens in this episode, but again, it's just not as memorable to me. And so it's going to go here. I remember more of this episode than I do of the previous episode, so it's going to go a little bit higher. But I just don't remember that much more. All right. Season 3, episode 8, Sustenance. Thousands arrive to argue with, then listen to Jesus as he preaches. As the preaching extends to the next day, the disciples have a problem. The thousands are hungry, but there's no food. This episode is 1 hour and 15 minutes long, and it came out on February 6, 2023. I don't know if it was actually an hour 15 minutes long, or if that is including the bloopers at the end. I'm pretty sure that is including, like, that's without the bloopers. I think this was just a really long episode, and I think I remember actually feeling the length of that. So fun fact about this episode, I remember I got an advanced screening of this episode because I was going to be in Israel with Brandon Snipe and Brandon Robbins, because we were leading a trip in Israel there. And so I got to see this ahead of time, because they gave us an advanced screener so that we could record our reviews and stuff ahead of time and post them online, because we were going to be out of town whenever they came out. That being said, this episode, I think it's stronger than these three right here. It goes higher up. Let's see. You know what? I'm going to put this at the top. I'm going to put it in between the season finale of season 1 and episode, 5 of season 3. I like this episode, but there's parts of it I don't really care for. I thought the feeding the 5,000 was well done. I thought the walking on water was well done. I thought that, like, from a cinematography perspective, I thought it was really well done. How they, like, contrasted, like, Eden and Simon Peter, like, doing, like, I thought that was really well done. My main issue is that I thought the Decapolis debacle thing, that part just, like, was, I don't want to say it was boring. I don't know. It just didn't feel like it contributed much to the overall story. To where, like, I like as a nerd who loves biblical, like, background stuff, I loved it. I was like, oh, this is like I love it from like a, like, that's the type, like, the stuff they were talking about is stuff that I research in my free time. I thought that was great. But as somebody who loves storytelling, it felt like everything just hit the pause button, and we spent so much time talking about these things. I was like, okay, it just, like, it just didn't feel like, again, a season finale, right? It felt like it was like, okay, this seems like something that would happen, like in any other episode. But then by the time you get to the end of the episode, you're like, okay, now this is a season finale, right? You're like, okay, Jesus walking on water, that was really cool. And the end of it, I think, is better than the beginning of it. And so for that reason, it does rank higher up there, but it's still in a wilderness period. We move on. We are now in season 4. We're getting closer towards the end. Season 4, episode 1, Promises. An intoxicating dance leads Herod to put an end to John the Baptizer, but no one can stop what or who he's ushered in. This episode was 57 minutes long. It came out on February 1st of 2024, and this was released in theaters. And you could feel the up in budget with season 4, right? Every single season, you could tell that the budget has gone up and up and up. And I remember sitting in the theater for season 4, episode 1, and I was watching it, and I was like, wow, like, this is a good episode, right? Like, this is legitimately a fantastic episode. Like just, you could tell that the budget was great, the acting was great. You have, like, Salome's dance, and you could tell, like, oh, that's a professional dancer, right? I mean, like, my wife, she's a dancer, and she was like, I recognize that, like, she's popular. And I was like, oh, whoa, that's really cool. And to me, this was great. They did a really good job with John the Baptist's death. Everything in this episode is really awesome. It doesn't belong in Mount Zion to me, but it does belong in Mount Sinai. And honestly, do I put it at the top of Mount Sinai, or I don't know. I do not know. You know what? I'm going to put it above the Wedding in Cana episode, mainly just because I've rewatched the episode, like the Wedding in Cana episode, so many times that I think I'd probably rewatch season 4, episode 1 first, just because I haven't seen that as many times. But I really do like that episode. I thought it was really well done. Season 4, episode 2, Confessions. Jesus founds his church on unholy ground as Simon goes public with Jesus' true identity, getting a new name in the process. But can the new Peter forgive old wrongs. This episode is without a doubt the longest episode so far at 1 hour and 21 minutes. And it came out on February 1st of 2024, also in theaters. And this episode's also, it's a banger. It's a really good episode. This is where you get to see Peter making his confession that you are, like you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus says, you are Peter, and on this rock I'll build my church. And then you have Peter and Jesus having this conversation by the campfire about like whether or not he should forgive. And it's awesome. And like just this whole episode is just also really good. I don't know which one I rank higher. Also, this episode culminates in like Peter forgiving Matthew, which is also really cool. So this is going to go on Mount Sinai. I don't know. I think I'm going to place it there. I think I'm going to place them in that order right there where it's like, okay, see, I think I liked episode 1 more, but episode 2 is close behind it. I really like that episode quite a bit. This is hard. This is really hard because now I'm even looking at these ones. I'm like, I don't know, but these are pretty good episodes too. Yikes. This is difficult. All right, season 4, episode 3, Moon to Blood. When Jesus heals a blind man on the Sabbath, religious leaders confront him, drawing a riotous crowd. Gaius defies a direct order, leading Quintus to take matters and someone's life into his own hands. This episode is 58 minutes long. It came out on February 1st, 2024, on the same day as episodes 1 and 2. And I've got to say, this episode was a massive, massive, massive disappointment. Episodes 1 and 2, like I said, they are up here. They are Mount Sinai territory. Those are amazing episodes of The Chosen. And season 4, episode 3 is the first Gehenna episode that we've got. I did not like this episode one bit, right? Oh, okay, sorry. That was a bit, that was exaggerating a little bit. I liked the episode. From a TV show watching perspective, it was a good episode. But from a narrative perspective, there were so many issues I had, right? And I will admit that some of these issues arrive from me just being like a Bible nerd who really just wants you to depict the Bible well. But even from a storytelling perspective, it just bothered me because like this episode makes Jesus look really bad. This is the episode where Rama dies, right? And I will say that even if I never read the Bible, this makes Jesus look bad because literally everybody is talking about how dangerous this situation is. Everybody's saying like Matthew and Peter are talking about it. Other people are talking about it. They're saying it seems like tension is too high. Maybe we should not go preach in the middle of the city right here, right? We could just as easily go out of the city and preach. We just shouldn't preach in the city because Quintus is mad. Yet Jesus chooses to do it, and it results in the death of one of his disciples, right? And to make matters even worse, that disciple dies while Jesus is fleeing to safety. And it just makes Jesus look really, really bad. Whenever I honestly, understanding the Bible's depiction of Jesus actually makes the episode look a little bit better because you're like, okay, well, this is the Son of God. He knows what he's doing, even if it hasn't been explained. But in the context of the show, he doesn't know. Right? Like as he's running away, all of a sudden he hears Mary weeping and he's like, what? And he turns around and he looks shocked. And so to me, it just looks like it's just not a good look from a storytelling perspective because to me, if this were any other show, like if this were not a Jesus show, this would be the moment where all of a sudden you realize the guy you'd been supporting this whole show probably does not deserve to be in a position of leadership. And basically, to me, I'd be like, oh, like, if this were not a Jesus show, I'd be watching it and I'd say, oh, he messed up. But obviously, that's not what we're supposed to get out of the show. We're supposed to be like, oh, no, he's got his reasons. But the only reason we can say that is because we've got the Bible in the back of our heads, right? Whereas if this were any other show, if this were a normal person who just performed a bunch of miracles, we'd be like, oh, he messed up. And that's what we would say. But in addition to that, from a biblical perspective, even the stuff that they adapt that's biblical, they changed all of it, right? Like they have Jesus healing the man, like the blind man from the pool of Siloam. And geographically speaking, this story took place in another place, but they also just changed the whole message of it, right? In the actual Gospel of John, whenever you read about this account, it's a beautiful message where you see that this guy is willing to literally sacrifice his well-being and his lifestyle for this person he's never seen. Right? Because the religious leaders basically kick him out of the synagogue and stuff, and he hasn't even seen Jesus with his eyes yet, right? Jesus healed him and sent him away to where he hasn't seen Jesus with his eyes, yet he is willing to be persecuted for the sake of Jesus. And then Jesus confronts the religious leaders and calls them out on this, and it's an amazing thing. Whereas in the show, they take this amazing story and basically it's just a means to an end. Jesus heals the guy in order to make the religious leaders mad, so the religious leaders confront him and he can make them mad, and then he can flee to safety while a Roman stabs his disciple. Like, to me, it's just a bad look on all accounts. And I don't know, like it's a well-directed episode. It's a well-acted episode. I really like Rhema. I'm really sad she's gone. But this episode, to me, I saw it. I was like, oh, the first 2 episodes of season 4 were so good. And this episode was so bad. And it makes it even worse because for the first 3 seasons, the 3rd episode was my favorite episode. And then you get to this and I was like, oh, this is not a good episode to me. It's just not. And to be fair, Dallas Jenkins was no longer writing the 3rd episode of each season at this point. But to me, it was like, oh, this episode was just, if this were any other show, it'd be like the jump the shark moment. But to be fair, the show's been so good so far that this is the first time I've had a legitimate disagreement with the show. Like, all the other times where there's been something controversial, I've just, like, defended them. And honestly, even in this instance, I defended their right to depict things this way. I just thought it was unwise. I think as a Christian, I would not feel comfortable as an artist depicting Jesus in such a way. But I still defended their right to do it. But this is the first time in the show where I just outright was like, oh, I hated every single choice that was made in this. It's still well acted, still well made. I just did not like what y'all did. And so that's the first episode that goes into the Gehenna category. And it was really a sour note to end that first reign, this first few episodes, right? It's like, oh, episode 1, episode 2, awesome. Episode 3, okay. Anyways, season 4, episode 4, Calm Before. Beginning with a funeral procession, time marches rapidly toward the final days of Jesus' ministry. While the disciples seek status for themselves, a Roman ruler comes with a humble request. This episode is 1 hour, 6 minutes long. It came out on February 15th of 2024. And this episode is way better. I really like this episode. The end of this episode is fantastic. This is where you have Gaius like finally coming to Christ, and it's an amazing event. But the first half of this episode is what really drags it down. The first half of this episode is basically that funeral procession with Rhema's body. And the scene is really well done. And you also have, the flashbacks to like how people responded afterwards. You have Thomas having like a panic attack. You have Peter, James, and John talking. Like, those were all good scenes individually. But then I think the reason why this episode to me falls a little bit more flat for me is because you have this huge time jump. And arguably this time jump covers, I think in the context of the show, they say it's been like 3 or 4 months. But in order for us to get to the end of Jesus' ministry, right? Because after this moment, we will be nearing the end of Jesus' ministry, so that by the end of season 4, we are arriving at Palm Sunday. You have to jump like a year to a year and a half. And so we have actually, like, at this point, we will have spent less time with the disciples and Jesus than we spend in this montage where we just skip all this stuff, like all this amazing character development. It just skips over it. And then by the end of it, Thomas is still just brooding. He's still upset. He's still angry. So in the context of the show, it makes it so that the majority of Thomas's time following Jesus has been spent in a place of bitterness and anger and hatred. And to me, that was like, oh, I hate that. Like to me, all of that is like just terrible. But the rest of this episode is really good. And then like by the time you get to the end of the episode, you've got Gaius converting. You've got, I think this is the episode where you have Peter, James, and John. You've got James and John asking to sit at Jesus' left and right hand in the kingdom. And then Jesus gets upset, and that's why he goes, and he's watching them as they're doing the olive press thing, and then Gaius comes and hugs him. The end of this episode is fantastic. The beginning of this episode and the montage thing takes it away from me. I still think it's really good, though. And for that reason, I'm going to put it in Mount Carmel, and I'm actually going to put it at the top of Mount Carmel. Because, like, the end of it is so strong to me that it outweighs the other stuff to where, to me, I will say that this episode felt the most like The Chosen that the show had felt in a while, right? To me, to me, this is a perfect episode that just embodies what The Chosen exists to be, right? It's exploring what it was like to be a follower of Jesus. And in that regard, it does a really good job. But is it my favorite episode? No, right? To me, there are certain scenes that I will revisit a lot. I don't see myself rewatching all of the whole thing, if that makes sense, right? So if it were just the back half of the episode, this would be a Mount Zion level episode. But The other part is more like wilderness, and so I'm just gonna kind of land somewhat in the middle, call it Mount Carmel. Yeah, so that works. All right, season 4, episode 5, sitting, serving, scheming. Roman soldiers demand the disciples carry their armor, but Jesus goes one step further. Frustrated by the direction of Jesus' ministry, Judas visits an old friend for advice. This episode is 1 hour, 8 minutes long, February 15th, 2024. This episode is where, they walk an extra mile, right? For the Roman soldiers. This is where they come to Mary, Martha, and Lazarus' house. I believe this is where Jesus rebukes Martha, even though I'm pretty sure in the episode he says he doesn't rebuke her, but he definitely rebuked her. This is where he notices that Lazarus is getting kind of sick. And this is ultimately where Judas goes and revisits Bob the businessman, whose actual name I'm forgetting. This was a solid episode. It belongs in Mount Carmel for sure. I don't know where to put it though. I'm gonna put it right here in between season 2, episode 2, and season 2, episode 5. I don't really have much to say about this episode other than the fact that I did really like it. I think that as an episode, it's kind of all over the place, but the individual scenes of the episode are so good that it leaves me looking at the episode favorably, if that makes sense. Season 4, episode 6, dedication. Jesus and the disciples celebrate Hanukkah. Matthew confronts Judas about irregularities, and the festival turns into a fight, then flight. The disciples escape with their lives, but learn a friend hasn't been so lucky. This episode is 1 hour, 5 minutes long, and it first came out on February 15th of 2024. This was the final episode of part 2 of season 4 as it was being released in theaters. And this episode was, it was a really good episode. I really liked the beginning of this episode in particular, the Hanukkah stuff. Really well done. I loved all of that. And then it gets even better. Well, not better. I would say that the second half is weaker than the first, but they're both really good. This is ultimately where, they're like trying to stone Jesus in the temple, and then they end up having to flee back to Perea, and they cross the Jordan River and stuff. This was really good. It's Mount Carmel material. I think it's going to go just above the last episode we ranked. I think it's going to go above episode 5, but behind season 2, episode 2. Actually, you know what? No, I'm going to bump it up. Actually, I'm going to bump both of these up because I think I like both of these episodes more than season 2, episode 2. So there you go. Look at that. The back half of season 4 is still starting off somewhat strong. It's just what episode 3. It's like, whew. All right. Season 4, episode 7, The Last Sign. Jesus brings Lazarus back to life and sets off the chain of events that will lead to his own death. This episode is 1 hour, 13 minutes long. I believe that's the second longest episode of the show so far. It aired February 29th of 2024. And this episode's a mixed bag. I really like all the Lazarus stuff. But the Thomas stuff drags this episode down. Because Thomas, I empathize with him, right? I've lost loved ones. I know what it's like to lose loved ones in a tragic way. I get it. But Thomas acts like a little baby in this episode, to where it's like Jesus doing this amazing thing. And I get why Thomas would be offended by it, right? Because Jesus is healing his friend, raising him from the dead, and Jesus didn't do that for his fiance. I get that. But to me, I don't know. I don't have a lot of patience for people who think that they are entitled to something from God. And believe me, I would say it a lot more softly if I was around somebody like that. But to me, it'd be different if Thomas were like a brand new believer who didn't know Jesus. But he's been following Jesus for quite some time. He should know better at this point, right? He feels entitled to receive something that he is not entitled to receive, right? And to me, that bothers me, especially since we are nearing the end of Jesus' ministry, and you're an apostle. You are one of the leaders, and I get that the apostles weren't perfect, but to me, the level of immaturity that Thomas demonstrates in this is the level of immaturity that would disqualify somebody from leadership. And to be fair, other apostles are going to do worse things. Judas is going to betray Jesus. Peter's going to deny him. I get that. But this is just a fictional plot development that they've introduced for the show, and to me, the inciting moment is something that goes against Jesus' character. And so all of this stuff afterwards, it just weighs it down to me to where I was like emo Thomas drove me nuts. And in season 5, they made it a lot better to where he isn't as emo. But at this point in the show, it just drove me. I was like, oh, everything else in the episode is great. We're introduced to the Watcher. We see the raising of Lazarus. We get to see Jesus and Lazarus having this conversation where they quote Isaiah, where they talk about Isaiah 53. But everything around it is Thomas. Thomas is whining. Thomas is throwing fits. He's throwing pots against walls. He's getting into arguments with the other disciples. And it just drove me a little bit insane to where I like this episode a lot, but it, like, the other stuff, it bumps it down to wilderness for me. Like it's genuinely just like, it's like, okay, good job. It's like, no, I'll call it Mount Carmel. Just because I'm running out of space in the wilderness area. I'm going to call it Mount Carmel, but it's going at the very end of Mount Carmel, unless I move things up. I loved a lot of it, but just the Thomas stuff drove me absolutely nuts. Season 4, episode 8, Humble. Jesus refuses to look and act like the Messiah everyone expects, arriving like a lamb instead of a lion and riding on a donkey instead of a warhorse. This episode is 1 hour, 7 minutes long, and it aired on February 29th, 2024. This was a good episode. It belongs in Mount Carmel for sure. I feel like there wasn't as much memorable in this episode. You've got Simon, Z, and Matthew going and asking for the donkey. You've got the opening scene with David riding in on a donkey. Or I guess he was riding in on a horse, from battle. You've got the ending scene with Jesus with the bridle and his mom. The bridle thing is just another plot development that's just like so weird to me. It's kind of goofy. I don't know where to put this one. I feel just like honestly mediocre about it. To where it's a good episode. You know what? I know I said that this ranks above the previous episode. I think it's going to go to Wilderness because I think the Wilderness episodes are the ones that I do feel somewhat mediocre about. But that being said, that is kind of changing my opinion here. Season 3, episode 8 does have to rank higher up here because I actually do really like Season 3, episode 8, even though the first half is kind of a slog. I do like it more than Season 4, episode 8. I would say Season 3 has a better finale than Season 4. Yeah, I don't know. I really don't have much to say about Season 4, episode 8. All right. We finally arrive at the final 8 episodes. We are looking at Season 5 now. At long last, let's go through them. Season 5, episode 1, Entry. Jesus rides into the holy city as king, but finds that the rulers have turned his father's house from a place of prayer to a corrupt market. 1 hour, 2 minutes long. Aired on March 28th, 2025, only 6 months ago. Or 5 months ago, really. All right, this episode, it was good. I like this episode. I know that like so basically, just spoiler alert. Episodes 1, 2, and 3 this season, I liked with I increased in my appreciation of them with each episode, right? So season 1, like episode 1 is gonna be it's gonna be the lowest of them. Honestly, I'm gonna be pretty straightforward here. I feel kind of mediocre about this one. It's an okay episode. It's good. I think that there's a lot of things that could have been stronger. I could be wrong here. Is this the episode where like they have that long dialogue about oh wait, no, hold up. Episode 1, they ride in on the donkey, and then this episode ends with Jesus like weeping over Jerusalem. Oh no, this like I like that scene a lot. This is gonna go up to Mount Carmel. It's gonna go up here. We're gonna put it between Shabbat and season 2, episode 4, whatever that episode was called. Yeah, I like that episode a lot. Okay, season 5, episode 2, House of Cards. Why kill Jesus when Rome can do it for you? As the Jewish high priest schemes to bring him down, Jesus strikes first, turning tables. This episode is 52 minutes long, came out March 28th, 2025. It was episode 2 of part 1 of The Last Supper, which was in theaters very recently. This episode is not as good as the episode that follows it, but it's a pretty good episode. And I said I would rank it higher than the previous ones. So this is where I'm starting to run out of space, so I'm going to have to bump stuff down. Because this is a Mount Carmel episode to me, which means that this episode is unfortunately going to get bumped down to the Wilderness, and this episode, episode 2, is going to be bumped up to Mount Carmel. I'm going to put it in between season 3, episode 5, and season 2, episode 2, or season 3, episode 2, right? Is that correct? Yeah, I like this episode, but I'm pretty sure, let me check real quick. I'm pretty sure this was the episode where we had that long dialogue scene, which was, yes. Um, yeah, this was where we had the long dialogue scene between Peter, Andrew, and no, not Peter, Andrew, Philip, Andrew, and then like all of the Decapolis people. That thing dragged for me, and so that brings it down. But the rest of it was still really good. Anyways, season 5, episode 3, Woes. Jesus preaches one last time to the massive Passover crowd, and the religious leaders try to trap him in his words. This episode, I'm not gonna lie, I think this is a Mount Zion episode. I think that it probably belongs at the end of the Mount Zion category, but it's a good episode, which, like, honestly, no surprise, because guess what? It's an episode 3. So literally, like season 1, 2, 3, and 5, their third episodes are Mount Zion territory for me, because they're just so good. This is the episode where Jesus finishes cleansing the temple. This is where he rebukes the scribes and the Pharisees. This is probably the best acting we've ever seen from Jonathan Rumi. And then it culminates in the Olivet Discourse, where Peter, Andrew, James, and John go follow Jesus to the Mount of Olives. He gives them the discourse. It's a very nice, quiet scene. And then you have Jesus having this vision of David singing a psalm. All of that, fantastic, right? I love all of that. Honestly, I'm bumping it above this to where literally all of these, look at that, season 2, episode 3, season 1, episode 3, season 3, episode 3, season 5, episode 3, they're all my favorites, and then season 4, episode 3 is at the very bottom because it is a terrible episode. All right, season 5, episode 4, The Same Coin. Afraid of public outcry and further embarrassment, Caiaphas resolves to arrest Jesus quietly at night. Only one problem: no one knows where to find him. This episode was 55 minutes long. It aired on April 4th, 2025 as episode 1 of part 2 of The Last Supper. And this episode is another Mount Zion episode right here. I'm going to put it down here though. This episode is the only episode in The Chosen that has ever made me cry. Because this is the It Would Have Been Enough episode. I believe, right? Let me check to make sure, but I'm pretty sure this is the episode that was It Would Have Been Enough. And I genuinely love this episode. I think it was just a very, very, very good episode. Is that correct? Or am I wrong? I'm pretty sure. Episode 4 is It Would Have Been Enough. So this is the episode where you've got Peter rebuking Judas. This is where you've got the women saying, like, they're doing their Dayenu for Jesus. This is just a really solid episode. Does it belong in Mount Zion though? Like, is this one of the best episodes of the show? No, I don't know if I can say that. You know what? I do have to bump it down. Like, it's a good episode. It made me cry, but I think that it probably belongs more along the lines of right here. It's on Mount Sinai. It's between season 2, episode 2, and season 1, episode 6. To where these episodes, I do have to admit, they are stronger episodes in general. But on a personal level, that episode made me cry. All right, 4 episodes left. We are almost done. Season 5, episode 5, Because of Me. The decision to arrest Jesus leads to a fiery debate. Roman soldiers track down a troublemaking crowd. Shmuel finds help from an unexpected source. This episode was shorter. It is 47 minutes long, and it came out on April 4th of 2025. And this episode was the one, I'm looking at my notes over here. This is the one where we have the return of Nicodemus at the very end. This is that correct? Yes. Yeah, this is where Nicodemus returns at the very end of the episode. Were there only 2 episodes released at this point? I'm really confused. Oh, that's right. They only released 2 episodes in part 1, and then they released 3 episodes for part 2. Okay, sorry, I'm sorry. So this was the final episode for part 2 of The Last Supper. I remember that because Nicodemus was the last thing we saw. But yeah, so this is the end. At the end of this is where we see Nicodemus. This is also where we get to see Caiaphas go on this long rant. Is it the episode where Caiaphas does like that really intense prayer? If so, I really like that scene. This is where Jesus curses the fig tree. This is where Pilate and his wife get into a really big debate. I like this episode. I don't think I liked it as much as some of the others. So what I think I'm going to do here is I think I'm going to move this episode up to Mount Carmel. And I am going to put this episode in Mount Carmel. And it's going to be... I think it belongs right below Shabbat. So in between season 1, episode 2, and season 5, episode 1. I think it's a good episode, but it could be better. All right, we are now at season 5, episode 6, Reunions. As Jesus' followers gather for the Passover meal, his enemies assemble for a manhunt. Judas holds a secret meeting. All right, so this is where we finally get to see Nicodemus again. We get to be introduced to Matthias. We get to see Judas finally, at the end of this episode, he meets up with Caiaphas, right? Actually, no. He meets up with Caiaphas at the beginning of the episode. That's right. And then ultimately, at the end of this episode, this is where you also have, Yusuf meeting with Nicodemus, I believe. Is that correct? Yeah, Yusuf meets with Nicodemus. Pilate meets with Caiaphas. And then you have Atticus meeting with Kaphne. There's just a lot of meetups in this episode, which is why the episode's called Reunions. And where to put this episode? I hate to say this. Some of these episodes are going to be moved into Gehenna territory because I'm running out of space because I don't know if we have any more Mount Zions here. I got to create some space here. So unfortunately for the end of season 3, it's going down to Gehenna. Why is it not wanting to move for me? Hold up. Boom. There we go. All right, so season 3 had to go down to Gehenna. I feel really bad for it. But this episode, Reunions, does it belong in the wilderness? I don't think it belongs in the wilderness. Yeah, it does. I guess it does, because I guess I feel kind of mediocre about it. But I will put it. I'm gonna put it in between the season finales of season 1 and season 3. Because it's a decent episode, but I do feel kind of mediocre about it. All right, season 5, episode 7, The Upper Room, part 1. Jesus arrives at the Last Supper. The disciples fear for his safety as Jesus' enemies close ranks around them. This episode is 55 minutes long, April 11th, 2025. This episode drove me nuts because it felt like 2 separate episodes. It like, the first half was about the apostles heading to the upper room, and then the back half were just flashbacks. And again, both of those individually were good, but together they make for a weird episode to where I can't rank the episode itself that highly. And I really liked John Mark at the beginning. That was really cool. I loved the introduction to John Mark, and I loved all that stuff. The flashbacks to me were okay, but they weren't that necessary. And so, given the fact that we already have some things in the Gehenna category, I think this is going to have to go into Gehenna as well, which is really sad, because it's still a good episode. But how do I feel? Actually, you know what? Maybe it doesn't have to go in the Gehenna category. I think I'm going to bump the season 3 episode down to the Gehenna category, because I think that this episode is better than a lot of the other ones. Now that I'm like looking at the list, I think this episode, I would be more likely to go rewatch this episode than I would Reckoning. So we'll put it there. Also, every time I think of the episode Reckoning, I think of the episode from Smallville, which is also called Reckoning, and that's the episode where Lana died, and then plot twist, Lana didn't die, Jonathan Kent died instead. If you never watched Smallville, I'm really sorry, but that episode came out 20 years ago, so spoilers are your fault at this point. Yeah, so episode 7 can go there. And then we get to the final episode that has come out so far, Season 5, Episode 8, The Upper Room, Part 2. Pilate summons Atticus to read him the riot act. The Sanhedrin boils over. The Last Supper ends. This episode is 1 hour, 7 minutes long. It came out February 29th, 2025, sorry. No, not even February 29th. It came out April 11th, 2025. What am I saying? This episode, I liked it. I did not like it as much as some of the other episodes in the season. Like, it was not my favorite episode, but I liked it. I liked it quite a bit. It's definitely Mount Carmel material, so let me move this bad boy down here. Is it Mount Sinai material, though? That's the question. That is the question, indeed. See, looking at this now, it's changing my opinions here. I think Season 4, Episode 4 has to be bumped above Season 1, Episode 4. And Season 1, Episode 4 is unfortunately going to go down here, which is really sad because that's a really good episode, but I think these episodes are all stronger. And I think that Episode 8 might go up here. Yeah, it is at the very end of my Mount Sinai category because it's actually a pretty solid episode. You've got the prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane, which is one of my favorite stories in Scripture. The build up to it is really well done. Does it belong higher on Mount Sinai? That's the category, though. That's the question. You know what? I think it might. I think that this belongs up here. I think that season 5, episode 8 is going to belong right here behind the It Would Have Been Enough episode, but above Indescribable Compassion from season 1. I think that is it. All right. Well, there we have it. All right, well, there is my tier list for all 42 episodes of The Chosen. Let me know how you would rank the episodes down below. I guess those would be pretty long comments, but I'll read through them and I'll see what you got. If you disagree with me, let me know. I'm fine with that as well, because my list is just my list. It is not necessarily the right list, and I would like to hear what y'all have to say. Anyways, my name is David Tate. This is Now Let's Be Honest. Be sure to keep a smile on your face. Don't let anybody steal your joy. Remember who you are, and I will see y'all later. Bye.